Now, this morning we focus on fake news, but it could also be called propaganda. Media personality Shaka Zulu has admitted working briefly with public relations expert Sihle Bolani. The businesswoman has made claims in the Johannesburg High Court that she was part of a covert ANC election campaign known as the War Room, aimed at discrediting the Democratic Alliance and the economic freedom fighters. That's ahead of the 2016 municipal elections. The ANC, on its part, has rejected these claims that it set up any such local covert election campaign or covert black ops. Bolani, however, has claimed in a court affidavit that an ANC campaign team known as the War Room was set up to produce a seemingly independent website, use so-called influencers on social media, and printed fake opposition parties posters of the EFF. The DA says it will ask the Independent Electoral Commission to look at these allegations that the ANC set up that covert election campaign to disempower the opposition parties ahead of last year's municipal vote. Joining us now in studio is political analyst as well as head of political economy at Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflections, Mr. Ralph Mathekga. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me.
First and foremostly, Mr. Mathekga, talk to us about your reaction to the claims by the PR agent Bolani in terms of this war room or the covert black ops operation that was set up by the ANC or its volunteers, as they called.
Well, the first thing was that the ANC paid their service providers, we wouldn't have heard about this. That was my first reaction to start with.
So pay back the money first.
Exactly.
Yes.
But, you know, looking at the substance of this, what has happened, we call these people PR expert. I mean, Elvis, really, we are stretching it. These are not PR experts. The advisory was wrong in the first place. This is extremely amateur work, and this is what you get when you employ people who have got no basis on the subject matter that is being dealt with, which is politics. There tend to be this idea in South Africa that actually you can tell someone who has been watching the news every day to come and start to help you about the challenges that a political party has. That you are not going to get an in-depth understanding of what you're going through. So this is exactly what has happened. But even worse about this, Elvis, is the question of misinformation. Then it's when you cross the line where you start planting stories about other stories that are quite in the first place false, you know, in fantastic stories that are out there, and not understanding as well that South Africans, the broader majority of South Africans, don't take Twitter seriously. People should get that. If Twitter was taken seriously, the EFF would have won elections, 2016 local government election, maybe even the 2040. So the sentiments you get on those social media platforms do not always translate into what happens on the ground. And people need to understand that. So that was quite a shoddy work, very amateur work by people, I think, who actually realized that the ANC leadership is at a crisis point, and they took advantage of the ANC, and the ANC was actually vulnerable. It allowed for this kind of a thing to proliferate.
Eben?
Ralph, I'm interested to get your view, because this kind of thing is not new. Underground campaigns and war rooms and the like. Every political party worth their salt should have some sort of operation to deal with, let's call it, below the line scenarios. Am I right?
You're right. Communication is very important in modern day. People have got access to digital media. It means that if you do not communicate, people are going to get, there will be a vacuum, and therefore there will be maybe wrong perception about what you do. So the principle here, there's nothing wrong with the principle. Everyone has a war room one way or another. I don't know, they might have different names, of course, what they call those kind of formation. This goes back to Nazi Germany. It's an old thing. It's an old propaganda thing. What I think is different about what we are seeing in these days, it's just the proliferation of digital media, where you are seeing this thing being put into digital media, where I think it is losing the depth of its classic maybe origins.
I thought that the war room that we heard from here in Johannesburg was initially set up to deal with service delivery shortcomings and service delivery protests. That's in the context that I understand it. So I was surprised when I heard the developments in the High Court. Did you hear similar murmurs?
You know, I would have thought the ANC would get people to help them, maybe to explain those service delivery problems and some of the protests, to deal with the substantive issues, and to put a word out there. Either you can accept, manage, the extent to which you accept they do it, politicians, of course.
Yeah.
But to have this thing become a pure PR machine that has got no relationship whatsoever with the substance of what is happening on the ground, that is exactly what baffles me. But this has not been concluded. But my sense here, I think you have runaway consultants in this issue here.
Yeah.
We've been given a mandate originally, have realized that the client is vulnerable, can take just about anything, and then they decided to come up with these ideas of 50 million and so forth. These are people who wanted to make quick cash out of the NC's vulnerability, and had the NC not got itself to that corner, it wouldn't have to deal with this now.
Now, Mr. Mathekga, politics, some say it's a dirty game. Isn't that perhaps, doesn't this type of operation, doesn't it come with the territory of politics?
It does come with that, but we should ask ethical questions so that people do not cross the line. I mean, to expect politicians to say nice things about each other, it's hopeless. It's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean they should be given a carte blanche to plant negative stories about each other. As a society, we still have a right to demand some level of righteousness in the manner in which these kind of war room and initiatives operate. That is where you draw the line. And I think the court might deal with that issue as to where does the legality come in. If they expedite this thing further, the legality issue can be dealt with the court. But I think that a lot of people should just hold back. Not everything in that was illegal. Actually, there just might be a small part of this thing that was illegal.
But let's look at that, because seemingly there was an independent news website, the new South African website, that was registered by Majota Kambule, better known as Fat Joe, and the so-called influencers on social media, as well as the printing of fake EFF posters and planting callers on radio stations, we believe. These were all part of the smear campaign to discredit the opposition. But did these clandestine operations really work in the favor of the ANC, because they lost a number of metros?
Well, there is something we don't know. It could have been worse. You can't measure that. I mean, I've heard people saying that it didn't work. Of course, initially, of course, you could say it didn't work. The NC has performed badly in the metros. What if it has helped with 10 basis point in the electoral performance? We will never know if this thing has worked or has not worked. The fact that the NC has lost those metros does not mean it didn't work. The NC lost those metros, yet the opposition could not win those metros outright. Maybe you could say, had it not been for this kind of initiative, maybe the opposition would have won those metros outright. So you can never know with certainty if this has actually worked. But the work itself, God, it was a bad job.
What action could be taken against the party found guilty of overstepping the line?
We shouldn't legalize, or we shouldn't litigate on everything. I know people are saying they want to sue and so forth. For me, the embarrassing revelations that the ANC has surrounded itself with this amateur PR, it's enough for people to know. You are talking about this thing now as we are speaking. Voters are not stupid. They are seeing these things. I don't think there is a need for people to go and sue the ANC for lying. I mean, the voters are the one who know this information, and they will process it as they vote, as they go forward. And after all, Elvis, I'm not aware of a legal principle that compels people to say great things about each other. There isn't any.
Social media, digital news, just very briefly, will that have an impact on future politics?
Oh, sure, it's going to have impact. It's going to ruin careers. It's going to bring about careers, and it's going to ruin political parties as well.
Mr. Mathekga, I thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio. That was Mr. Ralph Mathekga. He's a political analyst as well as head of the political economy at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflections. I wanted to ask him about the political economy of those parties, but we'll do it at another time. Right now, let's take a look at what you have to say. Over to Eben.